I'm Frank Lamb, and welcome to this Mastering the Machine webinar for July the 9th, 2021. My guest today was Zack Scriven of 4.0 Solutions, and our topic was the Industrial Internet of Things and Manufacturing 4.0, or Industry 4.0, depending on your terminology. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share here real quick. Make sure that works out well.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Vlad.
There we go.
How's it going, Zach?
Beautiful, beautiful day.
Morning.
Glad to be here. Yeah, good morning.
Cool. Yeah, so a couple people have jumped in, so hopefully everybody can see the little splash screen I've got up there. I don't know what the best method of doing these PowerPoints is. I don't make it fill the whole screen, everything, and I just kind of drag things back and forth over it as I need to show things. So everybody does things a little bit different. I'll go ahead and kind of formally start it now. Again, my name's Frank Lamb. Everybody that is showing up on this feed here has actually been a guest on here so far. So they're already familiar a little bit with what kind of what I do. I'm just a one-man show here. So I'm a one-person company. Used to have a machine building company with some employees and things, and closed that company down in 2006 and went to work for a big machine builder, and then restarted my company in 2012 as just me. So what is this Mastering the Machine? I put a document out back in 2013 as a kind of a lead magnet, opt-in incentive, whatever you want to call it. And people download that. And so that's where the name part of it comes from. And it's available for download still, although I don't do a ton with the email addresses that I collect. I've collected a bunch of them over the years, but haven't done a lot of marketing. But I do have this thing called the Automation Academy. And the reason I started this Mastering the Machine webinar is because I belong to another group called the Membership Academy that says if you create a membership site, you really ought to have live events every couple of weeks or so. And so that's what I do. I have these live events. And as the people here know, they've been guests on these before. So, you know, I try to feature some kind of a guest and have a different topic. Most of my topics relate to PLCs and HMIs or the projects that I work on down in Miami, which relates directly to what we're doing here. So what I thought I'd do here is I'm going to introduce Zack real quick and then go over my application, which I've been working on for about 5 years. And a lot of the things, unbeknownst to us, we're making it up as we go along, but we use a lot of the same principles that Walker Reynolds espouses as far as unified namespace. We never called it that, but that's what we have. We have an ignition platform with one source of truth for everything, although it's probably not arranged quite the way that Walker would necessarily recommend. For anybody that does watch this later, I would recommend strongly that you go take this mini course. And it did change location, and I found that out the hard way because I had a link in my Automation Academy to Intellic Automation, and all of a sudden I went there and I clicked on it, and it didn't work. And so I repointed it to this. This is great. This is the source for where I'm getting a lot of my information. And I'll talk a little bit about a document that I put together that has a lot of definitions and things in it, because it's easy to get lost with all these terms, things like unified namespace and Node-RED and MQTT and all these acronyms and platforms and things. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this, probably after Zack's done. So today's topic is Industry 4.0 and the industrial Internet of Things. And one of the things that Walker, of course, espouses is having a single source of truth called a unified namespace. Now, there's actually a definition for just namespace. You can go look it up on Wikipedia and find out what that kind of thing is. For those people who are familiar with programming, they're already familiar with tags and things like that, and structures, right, UDTs. So it sort of relates to that. And so what I did here is this is a kind of a composite map of some of the data maps, data flow maps that Walker has put on his whiteboards and things as he explains things. And I've kind of combined it with the way that this company up here in the corner works, American Beverage Depot. So a little bit, my background is systems integration, machine building, and I have a grand total of about 3 customers that I regularly work with. One would be a training company in Canada. So I used to go all over the United States and teach PLCs and HMIs, but a lot of that's kind of died down because of COVID. The second one is a local company, Automation NTH, and I do a lot of work with them still and train people. They still build machines and do a lot of programming, and I really don't help them with that. But they are somewhat involved with IIoT. They espouse a lot of digital twin stuff because they build individual machines. So they build also digital twins of those machines, for those who know what a digital twin is. And my third customer is, I still do systems integration for this one customer, and they've, Juan Pablo Garbin, the owner of the company, has actually been a guest on my webinars here. And I've done several of my webinars from American Beverage Depot. And so people may be familiar with some of the different machines that I have down there and things like that. I've talked a lot about those. And so the production process down there, there is SCADA, PLC, and devices, as you see here. I put CPASoft barcode because that's what we're looking at right now. And I know Walker's familiar with CPASoft. Has been talking about that. I floated these things out here because they're all issues and things that we discuss at American Beverage Depot when we talk about planning our systems. Business enterprise, again, if you go through some of Walker's presentations, he'll talk about things like, even if you don't have an ERP system, you don't think you do, you probably do, right? And so in the case of American Beverage Depot, theirs is QuickBooks, as he mentioned. And so we are pulling information, trying to pull information directly out of QuickBooks, right? But right now we're doing some manual entry because of cybersecurity and things.
Is it a QuickBooks Online or is it enterprise like QuickBooks?
It's enterprise. Yeah, it's enterprise. It's on their server. So I'll show a little bit of, here's kind of their network layout right now. And I'll kind of flip back and forth here. This is basically the data connections to a lot of the plant floor stuff. Their QuickBooks and most of their other stuff is on this enterprise network, right? So if we need information, we can pass it to the server independently on the enterprise network. And yes, there are connections to the web via this network, of course, through firewalls and things like that. And then this is a completely separate network. And we're having, there's a lot of data that we kind of manually put in on this network right now. We're still in the process of putting this together. This is the product flow through the plant. So these are all the different machines and things that we've been trying to put together, data acquisition systems for the last about 5 years. 5 years ago, Juan Pablo, who is the owner of the plant. So I have a very unique situation. I'm working directly with the owner of the plant. And I taught him much of what he knows about technology. He was a very technically minded person, but he was busy running the plant. He has a plant manager. There are multiple owners of this plant, but Juan Pablo and his sister own well over 50% of it. And then there's a minority owner or two in there, and his dad's involved. They put this plant in 2003, and it's a lot of the equipment in the plant is pretty old. But where we kind of started with this is this part of the system was already had a SCADA system on it. It had an RSView 32 old school Slick 505 system. And we put Ignition in originally to upgrade that. We needed to get something that was a lot more modern. So he bought Ignition. He's a big beat people down on price and negotiate. And this was back when Ignition was a little bit smaller and you could do that. You can't really do that so much anymore. And I'll talk about that and some of the implications that that's had. That's why we're looking at things like TatSoft right now, because they have a little better deal and they have MQTT, which is kind of built in, right? So cost savings, it may be worthwhile to add this, rather than just scabbing onto Ignition, add a completely separate TatSoft application in addition to this. But anyway, this is the product flow, and much of what we do as far as grabbing data comes from that product flow. So it started out and it was kind of just a SCADA system running this, but all of a sudden we started having different issues. And I watched the entire, by the way, hour-long course yesterday. I had already seen the mini course, but I looked at, and I'm trying to find the name of this, the 1 hour mastermind, the free mastermind. It's the first hour, I think, of the presentation. And a lot of what he talked about there really kind of hit home for me, where when you interview the customer, and of course I work directly with the owner. As a matter of fact, he does most of the SQL work. He's very good with SQL and he's very good with JavaScript and things like that. And I'm really good with the hardware part. I taught him a lot of his PLC skills and then a lot of his, front end skills as far as creating the screens and things in Ignition. And then he kind of went on his own and he spent a couple of years just working with SQL and a lot of this, the data acquisition. And we started very quickly having issues that he needed to solve. He could have gone and used something like Visual Basic, and he's had little apps created, but they didn't work very well. So he's created everything in Ignition. His warehouse management system is in there, and it's self-created. It's just a big SQL database. A lot of his barcode stuff is self-created, right? It's he just scans stuff in, and he's run into all kinds of little, where the rubber meets the road problems with, like when people scan the wrong thing and it goes to the wrong location. And people don't realize that when things arrive in the plant, shipping things out is easy, right? When you send things out of the warehouse, you know where it's going to go and you know what the product is because you made it and you palletized it and everything else. But when you receive things, that's a completely different problem. And so we're spending a lot of our time now automating that process. When you receive things, you don't, number one, where they ordered, right? Is this even our product? You get a barrel of something and you don't necessarily know what it is. And the manufacturer does not give you what their barcode or necessarily is going to even look like, right? You may get computer equipment, you may get drums of juice, you don't know what you're going to get, right? So you kind of have to work through that. That's a lot of where the integration part comes. Then you have some physical constraints, like the guy's on a forklift. He has a barcode scanner. If he scans something, he doesn't necessarily have the ability even to hold like a tablet in his hand and scan with the other hand. Now, can you take the tablet and can you read the barcode and do that? Well, you could, but then you would have to kind of create drivers and get applications within that tablet and work on that. So right now what he's got is he's got a hand scanner and the thing has the ability to vibrate. So we give messages to the people that scan the stuff via the vibration. If it's not right, we can blink a light or we can vibrate the hand scanner. That all ends up in Ignition. So a lot of the logic that goes in there is working, hand in hand with the big SQL database. Well, there's at least probably 8 databases in there doing different things. One of which we're going to try to transition to being the unified namespace. Right now, our names, we do have a single source of truth, but they're in a lot of different kind of little directories and things depending on the machines. Part of what Zach's probably going to talk about and what Walker espouses is going back to this, having an enterprise level, right? Kind of like building a UDT and having a site level and an area level. And something that hit home when I listened to Walker's presentations were, do you ever plan to sell your plant? Well, they will never be more than a single location facility. They're a kind of a co-packer. They do have their own products and they make juice and things like that. But if they ever did sell out, it would be because somebody wanted what's called their Tetra lines. The Tetra lines, Tetra packs are juice boxes, and only a certain number of people are allowed to have make juice boxes within a geographical area. It's kind of like Allen Bradley, right? They'll only have a certain distributor within their area. Well, they're one of the Tetra Pak co-packers in that area, and Tetra Pak won't put another Tetra Pak, capable company within a geographical area close to them. So if somebody did buy them, there is the possibility that they would do that just to acquire that Tetra Pak capability. So that's something to think
You're
about.
building you're building IP for this client. That's the value. You're really building the unified. You're building like the unified namespace is it's like the digital twin. It becomes the business. It becomes more valuable than the business itself.
That's
right.
right.
Because it is the business.
The interesting part about this is I'm not actually, the owner is. So the owner is a guy that's probably not much older. I'm going to guess, Zach, and say you're in your late 20s to 30s. You're right at the age of Juan Pablo. Juan Pablo is probably, I'm going to say 33. He's brilliant. He's the owner of the plant, and he does the work. He does most of the back end work and most of the database work. I have to catch up with him because he learns that stuff quicker than I do. Now, my expertise, I know plant floor equipment, and I can take a machine that somebody else wrote the program for and modify that program. And I noticed Walker was talking about being an expert in one platform. I'm kind of an expert in 3 or 4. So I teach Allen Bradley and Siemens, so I'm very good at those. I've been doing them for many, many years. I also did a lot of GE in my earlier years. And when you look at this, that's one of our problems here. A lot of GE, a lot of old GE, a lot of 90/30s. You cannot simply attach to those things and pull data out of them. I can modify the programs, no problem, but we've run into problems where when we tried to connect this directly, put an Ethernet card in there and just drill in and grab data out of it, it literally stopped the machines. And we don't know why. So that's one of our issues right now. How can we solve that problem? Can we change processors? Well, they're running, every day. You could maybe swap a processor out on a Sunday, maybe. It would be tough because if it didn't work right, you better be up by that night. You're running CIP on those machines, and you better be up and running by Monday morning. So we don't have a lot of downtime, even over Christmas, right? We may have 2 days of downtime at one time. So it's not an easy thing to change these to something else. What's interesting is when they bought these machines, GE was their platform, but they switched to Allen Bradley within a year or two when they bought those machines. So now everything's ControlLogix. I could have gotten in there and done anything I would have wanted to with ControlLogix, right? We could have swapped processors, upgraded as need be. But right now we're stuck with these. And it's easy to say, well, just put an Allen Bradley in there anyway. Well, the hardware part of these machines is much, much more expensive than the controls. It's not very complex what it does, but a lot of it is cam driven stuff. I showed a video of that, I think in the last webinar we did with Tim. I showed these, they almost look like big transformer hands, right? Pulling boxes down. And that's that machine. They're, close to $1 billion machines, and there's 3 of them in there. You're not going to swap controls out easily for that, even though we did that exactly that here. This was all Seidel equipment, and we completely changed this from the old slick stuff to ControlLogix. So we're on a pretty good platform now. Walker talks a lot, of course, about MQTT. We don't have any of that yet. I see a reason to do that now, but we can do everything with OPC because so much of our stuff is Allen Bradley and we're using Ignition. We can go grab data and pick up transitions as we need to. If we need to tie 2 machines together, we do that. We have to kind of here tying the syrup to these lines, but what we do is we sort of treat them as part of the syrup system. So if we get transitions in this data system, I will say here, right? That's where I have this dotted line kind of over to these. We have a lot of individual sensors and things stuck out on these lines in different rooms. We just have nodes sticking out there for CIP or the pasteurizers or whatever, but tied into this data system. That's been our shortcut. it's not easy to come into an existing plant and say mentally, I'm going to just revamp everything and I'm going to build this architecture. And, you know, you have to work around what's already there. That's one of the things. Now we've been able to swap things out, and like these, we voided any warranties on all these palletizers long ago. You know, we pulled everything out, kind of recoded it, converted it into what we wanted it to be. And because of that, we're able to grab any data we want to from any of these systems, right? This is the original one that we put the ignition on. And then now, of course, ignition's up here. It's not down here just on this system. It's up here on everything now. So that's kind of how we transition into that. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Zack. It's his turn. Zack Scriven is kind of I know you're a tech guy. I read a lot of your LinkedIn profile. And you started working with Walker Reynolds several years ago. And then Walker had a company called Intellic, and still does, I guess. And then kind of spun off this 4.0 solutions company, apparently. And that's maybe where you got involved, or?
No, actually, I was kind of largely behind the driving force of that spinoff. So Walker and I, we started working together in 2013 on an a large enterprise SCADA project. And this was an oil and gas project that was enterprise wide. They had like 5 different assets. Each one of those assets was like an oil and gas company that they acquired, right? So they got, you know, like this would have been like $100 million SCADA system upgrade if like Wonderware or Rockwell tried to integrate it all, right? So through that process, this was an ignition project. This was the Firebrand award-winning project where Walker and I met. The one with like, originally it was like us 4 as developers, but it grew to like 19 developers. And over the course of that year, they ended up spending around $1.4 million. And so the cost of the way that we integrated it like was groundbreaking. So like we just realized we couldn't do things the way we were doing them before. So naturally, you know, out of that project spawned like the Gateway Area Network, right? This was actually before MQTT. If we had MQTT then, it would have went even smoother, right? So that was kind of us really learning the concept of the unified namespace in practice, right? We identified the need and we really built it out, working with Inductive and working with this large client to, you know, take the time that it was a development lift, right? We developed a whole back end to manage our tag system that we, you know, instead of just clicking plus new tag and, you know, you enter in the information, we had a database that drove all of our tag creation. So when they wanted to bring a new asset online, we had that all modularized and, you know, configured to just drop in new assets. So, you know, then we kind of went separate ways for a few years. I went and worked for a few other system integrators, and Walker spun off he started Intellic integration in like 2015, 2016. So in 2018, I had like this wild idea I was kind of unfulfilled in the job I was in. I was really working for like a legacy integrator at the time. And I really was just drawn to want to do more, right? I was actually working on let me share. Would I be able to share here?
Oh yeah, let me turn it over to you. Stop share. And I know you have to do something funky here. Let's see, multiple advanced sharing options, all participants. Now, I wish there was a way to give it to a specific person, but I think it works now.
If you make me a co-host, that would work, but
that's the way to do it.
Everyone here. By the way,
I'm
actually,
always afraid somebody could grab this. You know, Vlad could take it right now. Vlad could share, and I could probably shut him off.
Well, no, I do appreciate you setting the stage, and I do appreciate you having me on. And, you know, you're one of the few, actually a lot of people on this call right now are some of the few content creators I actually trust in the industry that actually put value first before marketing. So it's actually an honor to be here presenting. I hope I am able to provide some value and some additional insight. And I love how in deep you went with that customer, American Beverage Depot. Thank you for, you know, adopting the new technology and trying something new. And, you know, it's going to pay off. And we're going to get into industry 3.0 versus industry 4.0 here. And American Beverage Depot is kind of positioned in a way where they can capitalize on that 4.0 transition, right? Yep. You hear people talk about 75% of digital transformations fail, or Walker says it's even higher than that. Over 90% of digital transformations fail. So what is it that makes the company successful, right? So it really boils down to three things. It's the right technology, it's the right strategy, and it's the right partners, right? So American Beverage Depot is really, they've got all three right now. So let's kind of dive into what digital transformation is and what's the difference between Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0. So we can kind of see, from a 10,000 foot level, the transition that American Beverage Depot is currently on. So if you guys can see this here. And by the way, I didn't actually make these slides. Someone from our community made these slides and they did a co-presentation with Walker. And so thank you, John McKeon, for creating these slides. So, but in any case, it's obviously inspired from our content. Walker likes to famously present from, a OneNote and just keep it really, no PowerPoints and nothing crazy, but I did actually like this slide. So over here on the left, you have the automation stack. And, we've done a lot of videos about this, but I'll keep it short. These are all, each one of these devices, each one of these layers in your business, from your PLCs to your SCADA system, your MES system, which kind of sits in between the blue line and the orange line, which, this is your plant floor from the blue line down, and from the orange line up, that's kind of your enterprise, your IT network. And you kind of have your manufacturing execution system here in the middle, kind of relaying information. A lot of times this is paper. And a lot of times this is completely air gapped,
Or spreadsheets.
The problem is
spreadsheets with lots of macros. That's what we've got.
Yeah. So the problem is you can't digitally transform an organization like that. I mean, it's obvious, right?
Yep.
So, Facebook is not keeping our user data in a spreadsheet, right? They're not, typing in a new line every time a new person signs up. So what is it that makes this possible, right? What is this edge device and what is this over here on the right, this unified namespace? How do we get from over here to over here? So we actually teach, there's really only 4 things to create a unified namespace. People ask all the time, hey, Zach, is SAP S4 HANA a unified namespace? Is WinCCOA, is it a unified namespace? Answer is yes, actually. Famously, inductive automation's Ignition, and more recently, Factory Studios frameworks, Tatsoft's frameworks platform are, kind of the go-to platforms for creating your IIoT unified namespace. But really, to be a unified namespace, to create an IIoT ecosystem, you really only need 4 minimum technical requirements. You can have more, right? American Beverage Depot can choose to add a 5th one if they wanted to, but they really need these 4. And the 4 minimum technical requirements are, it's got to be edge driven, right? So what does that mean, right? The configuration is done from the edge side, not the server side. So in the same way, when a user goes and signs up for Facebook, it's edge driven, right? I go to Facebook, I'm from the edge, Facebook's the server. I go to Facebook, I sign up, create a new account. Facebook didn't have to do anything. I'm automatically plugged into the network, right? So you got to be edge driven. You got to be report by exception, right? So that's the second one. Report by exception means you're only reporting data that changes, right? And it's being reported from the edge, published into the unified namespace. Why is edge driven matter? Because if you connect everything in your network, then if it's not edge driven, if you're sending all of the data, you'll run into bandwidth issues, right? It's just too much data, So it's really important that these edge devices right here are only reporting the data that changes when it changes. The third minimum technical requirement, so you got edge driven, report by exception, it's got to be lightweight. In addition to 1 and 2, you still got to have that third component. It's got to be a lightweight payload, right? A lot of people talk about OPC UA, because it's so common. But OPC UA by in the standard implementation fails on edge. It fails on edge driven, and it fails on report by exception. OPC UA is 9 times out of 10, no, probably 99 times out of 100 configured server side pull response. So every time you add a new piece of equipment on your plant floor, you got to go into your OPC UA server. You got to enter in the device. You've got to add, sometimes you've got to add the tags, not always, but If you don't add the tags, your clients that are connecting to your OPC server have to know what those tags are, right? There's no self-discovery going on, right? That's edge-driven, right? Self-discovery comes from edge-driven. If it's server-driven, you have to know what to put into the server. So it's not scalable. And then the last but not least, it's got to be open architecture. It's got to play nice with everything. You could have 1, 2, and 3, but if it's not open architecture, you're just creating another data silo. Why does open architecture matter? Why can't I just go to Rockwell and get the connected enterprise? Well, 2 reasons. 1, you're gonna run out of money before you digitally transform your whole organization. But 2, Rockwell doesn't make all the best in class products at every layer in the stack, right? Rockwell, well, actually, no, it's not Rockwell. It's Allen Bradley makes some of the best PLCs on the planet. You know, we wish they were a little bit more adopting MQTT and Sparkplug beyond the edge, but you know, we'll live with it for now, you know, because we can easily put in an edge gateway, right? We're willing to accept the fact that these Allen Bradley PLCs don't have the minimum technical requirements yet because they're just such a good PLC and we're so familiar with them and they do the job. We can put in a low cost edge gateway, and that edge gateway, this edge device right here, may be connecting to your, it's probably connecting it to it over OPC UA. Well, obviously if it's an Allen Bradley, it is. But even if this was like let's say you had 10 smart PLCs all on the line here, you could still put an ignition and pull those PLCs with OPC UA if you wanted to, right? You've already got that set up. So what I would argue, or what I would suggest, or what I would say is your ignition server is actually your edge gateway, Frank. Mm-hmm. Your ignition server becomes your edge gateway. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take all the, you know, so you can, from everything to the left, it can be pull response, it could be Modbus, it can be, you know, the traditional legacy stuff. But everything going forward is either going to be a smart device natively, or you're going to put in an edge device to publish it, convert it into your IIoT ecosystem, right? It doesn't have to be MQTT. We like MQTT because it's one of the best right now, but you know, it's got to just be edge driven, report by exception, lightweight, and open architecture. And then you can create this ecosystem. And that's where the magic happens, right? And some people just really don't get that, you know, just installing ignition, right, doesn't mean you digitally transformed, right? It goes back to that strategy, right? What is your digital strategy? And I'll kind of go into the steps to digital transformation next, and we'll kind of see what that strategy looks like when you're digitally transforming. But if there are any questions, please do leave them in the chat, and I will, you know, answer them. And I will make these slides available too. Vlad said some of my customers that are Fortune 500 are using whiteboards for capturing line production metrics. Yeah, see, that's gonna fail, you know, because it's not edge driven, right? You got to manually write it there and all those things, right? So let's move on to the next slide here. So what are the steps? These are the steps and keys to digital transformation. What is it and how to achieve it? This is how you become the 1 in 10 that succeeds. It's real simple. Number 1, digital transformation is a strategy, not a project, right? There is no beginning, well, except for when you admit you have a problem and you start it. So that could be the beginning, right? If you don't admit you have a problem, it's the beginning of the end for you. You're going to be one of those companies that goes out of business or gets acquired. So you got to understand that it's a strategy. It's not a project. It has no end. It's in continuous iteration and it's in continuous development. Number 2, transformation of the way manufacturers operate their business. Industry 3.0 is all about changing the way manufacturers operated their production line. Industry 4.0 is changing the way they operate their business, right? If this was 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about connecting QuickBooks to your PLCs. You would have probably, you just would have thought you were crazy, you know? But now you have to do this to stay in business, to stay competitive, right? You know, American Beverage Depot is in a position where they could become the most competitive supplier of that. What's the name of that packaging?
Well, Tetra Paks, but they also make water and just bottled juice, and the whole works pretty much anything that any bottler does. Yeah. Excellent.
So obviously being more efficient and reducing downtime and connecting your data and reducing integration costs is gonna, you know, it's gonna make that business obviously do better. But in those Tetra Paks, American Beverage Depot has the opportunity to be the gold standard for Tetra Paks, right? They could be the model. They could be the one that doesn't go out of business, and they could be acquiring all the other 10 Tetra Pak manufacturers that failed to transform, right? So you got to be thinking about this when you're building your architecture. You got to be building it for scale, right? You got to be building it for the future, right? I mean, there's, you don't have to be like, oh, I want to take over the world or anything like that. No, Industry 4.0 is all about creating an ecosystem of people too, right? It's not just software and hardware, it's people, right? So it's a beautiful thing. I really love it. So last but not least, number 3, it starts with admitting there's a problem. If you don't admit there's a problem and you just call us up and say, hey, Zach, I want ignition and here's how I want you to do it. And probably won't even pick up the phone, to be honest, but that's not the way that we work. We work with clients that come to us and admit that they have a problem, right? They've watched our content, they've gone through the mini course, they've done their research, and now they're ready to take that first step. Most integrators would be happy to take a PO for a proof of concept and just get started right away. But we really urge and recommend clients integrate on both our students and our integrators in our mastermind community, and also manufacturers that we work with. We don't do any integration projects at 4.0 Solutions. We only do training for other integrators and training for end users. But we also do assessments, right? So this is an assessment is the first step in a digital transformation project or, implementation, right? It's not a project, right? But it's the start of your digital transformation, is a digital transformation maturity assessment. And it starts by inventorying the business, inventorying the intelligence. These are all inventorying the business is all that slide that you showed with all the manufacturing workflow. That's inventorying your business. Inventorying the intelligence is, what are the PLCs I've got on my lines? What is what is the software? I'm using Ignition here for SCADA. I'm using some custom code here for my WMS. I'm using, QuickBooks for ERP. That's inventorying the intelligence. The third step, and that's kind of where the DTMA would kind of end there, right? We'd inventory the business, inventory the intelligence, and then we would take what we learned and we would write a roadmap for success. And in that roadmap for success, right, there's going to be a proof of concept, right? This is the area in the business that we've identified is the highest opportunity for impact, right? You can do a proof of concept anywhere, but ideally you need to start in the highest impact part of the business to get value as quickly as possible and use that value to fund your additional transformation, right? Digital transformation doesn't start with $1 million PO. Digital transformation starts with a $10,000 or $20,000 assessment. And then it starts with probably, $25,000, $50,000 proof of concept, right? Ignition's getting a little more expensive, right? You got to get some licensing and you got to get some development, right? But because you've laid the foundation, you've inventoried the business, you've inventoried the intelligence, you've talked with all the 5 cross-sectional groups in your organization, your leadership, your engineering, your IT operations, and your quality departments. You've done this assessment with all of those separate groups. You've taught them what it is that you're doing. You've taught them what Industry 3.0 is. You've taught them what Industry 4.0 is, and you've listened to all their problems. So you, as the solutions architect, you've identified by going through this process, one, that the client knows that they've got a problem and they're coming to you for help, right? They got the right partner. So that's really like lubing the runway for success. It's like loading the spring. If it's like an aircraft carrier, right? It's like, it's launching off, right? If you don't do the DTMA, it'd be like going on an aircraft carrier and just, trying to go full throttle and take off. You're just going to go right off the edge. So you got to load that spring. You got to get all the stakeholders on board. You got to teach them. Digital transformation is mostly just teaching everyone what actually the digital strategy is, so they're all on the same page, right? So then that's where you kind of get into this step 4, which is integrating all of that information into the unified namespace. And that's where you're at, Frank. And with your client, you're already in this iterative process, right? You say, he's developing. They've already got the agile mindset. It's not a waterfall project. It's an agile project. It's a flywheel. It's a continuous development.
You mentioned your structure. One of the really nice things, and I've just kind of lucked into this, they're not a very big company. They probably have 100 employees, including warehouse people and everything. Not a lot of people on the plant floor, but the IT department and the engineering department is myself and Juan Pablo. There are a few other people that can modify PLCs, and we have brought contractors from the outside to get, especially put new controllers out there to grab information from facilities equipment. We're grabbing power grid information. We're grabbing water temperatures from the cooling towers and things like that because we need all of that. And you were talking about how you iterate into, you present the information and iterate. Because he's the owner of the plant, he knows what they need. And some things have come up, like our sales guy needs to know the cost of making the juice, not only from the standpoint of the contents that go into the juice, which comes from the ERP system, right? How much did this drum of nectar cost? But also how much, what is the overhead of this plant? So, you have secretaries and you have, the cost of water and a lot of things that are pretty constant through the day. What do those things cost? Those come from QuickBooks. And we've talked about, the security aspect. Do you really want all the overhead information to be available for everybody? Everybody can go drill in there and look at the salaries that are being paid to the management and things like that, right? But they do represent overhead, and they do get recalculated pretty regularly.
You bring up a good point.
Yeah,
you bring up a good point. So we actually operate off of 5 core values. I'm only going to mention one, which is transparency, and Tesla operates the same way. The technician, they don't call them operators, the technician that's on the end of the Model S line, or Model Y in Berlin, and every line, they have the exact cost, not just of the materials, but of the labor of that went into that specific car, not at the end of the quarter, but in real time. And Tesla knows that with that information, right? If you're a transparent organization, you don't care that that the executives are making 350,000 a year and the engineers are making 150, and the operators are making 70 or whatever, right? Like, it's a transparent organization. It's all out there anyways. So if they're not, there's obviously security that can be put into place to make it such that roles and responsibilities are adhered to, right? That's all within part of your IoT platform. But I'm going to say this. You said, your client knows what they want, right? But what they want is a function of what they know. And when you get into this iterative phase, you're continually presenting new information. You just presented, the other day, the costing on, what is that barrel cost, right? Or what is our overhead on this actual machine? You're continually presenting new information. And from that new information, your customer is learning from that knowledge, not just, the plant owner, but every stakeholder in the plant. And what may matter to one stakeholder may not matter to another, right? So that's why you got to put it all out there for the stakeholders to decide what's important to them. They're going to learn from that knowledge, and they're going to come up with new ideas. Your employees are, your operators are your smartest people on your business, right? You got to enable them to solve problems. That's one of the questions we ask when we're doing a DTMA with our clients. In the executive leadership team, the first question we ask is, do you realize, or do you think you're the smartest people in the organization? Or do you acknowledge that your operators are? Right? I mean, we don't phrase it like that, but we let them ask. And then they always inevitably say, yeah, of course, they're the smartest people. But then we ask again, and it's really up to the architect to determine whether or not they're telling you the truth, right? So we've done DTMAs with clients where we don't work with them after, it saves us a lot of time and headache. Had we not, had we started a proof of concept, that would have been a much bigger headache, right? We do a DTMA with a client, we provide some value, we get them on the right track, but we identified there's some issues that, the client, maybe they don't have the right values, right? Their values don't, it becomes apparent in the DTMA that they don't, they're the type of company that extorts their operators, that, it's not the type of company that we want to work with. So So once you learn from that new knowledge, right, you get new ideas, you grab some new data, you get a new edge device, and you publish that data into your unified namespace. You expand the unified namespace, which then goes back into presenting new information and continuing this cycle. So once you're in this iterative process, the goal is to really go step by step to achieving the holy grail. This is the holy grail of manufacturing. This is if you take away anything from this presentation, you should take away the definition of the manufacturing holy grail, because I haven't really seen it defined anywhere else. So number one, your business is connected. Everything and everyone is plugged into the network. All the people, software, and hardware, all the stakeholders are all connected. They're all integrated, right? They're all integrated into a single unified namespace where all data and information can be accessible. Number three, your stakeholders are informed in real time. What does that mean, right? Your reports operate off of real-time data, and they're continually updating. They're not a report that's generated on a Monday morning for last week's production data, right? Why does that matter? Because the shorter you can make that delta where you're iterating, obviously the quicker you can scale, right? If you take 2 years to do one iteration, you're not iterating very fast, right? I know that's an extreme example, but you would be surprised. Some people start projects and they go off into the sun they go away, they hide in their den, and they build this monolith, right? They do all the manual integration, they deploy it, and then they wonder why it fails. 18 months later, they deploy it and they wonder why it failed. When we're doing these iterative process, this is typically like a 4 to 6 week sprint where we have clearly defined deliverables. We want to add in this new asset, we want to present this new dashboard, and we want to do some training with your operators on this new scheduling system or whatever. Boom, it's 4 to 6 weeks. Let's say whatever your hourly rate is, you get a PO for like it's not a huge PO, right? I mean, every time that you're doing a new iterative, and this is kind of more on like the integration side, like how does the business side work? You're working with your client and you're providing value at every step of the way, such that the next PO is like, they can't wait to get to it because they're just excited to work with you and expand the unified namespace, right? But like I said before, digital transformation doesn't start with $1 million PO, right? It starts with a DTMA, and it just goes step by step, chunk by chunk, providing value at every step of the way in an iterative and agile development cycle. And so, that allows you to, number 4 in the manufacturing holy grail, you're displaying the current state in real time, right? You've got all that information. You're displaying the current state of the business in real time. That is the current state of the machines, the current state of the employees, the current state of the financials, right? But you're not only displaying the current state, number 5, you're displaying the future state. You're displaying the future state in real time too, right? You're not doing some study on some data set and crunching some numbers and then boom, producing a result that's the future state in a snapshot. And this is further down the road, right? This is when you've already got the unified namespace. This is when you're publishing your data into like a cloud ecosystem like AWS to leverage their machine learning tools. But you're using those machine learning tools to create models and to create predictions about the future state of your business. And you're making that a future state of your business available to all your stakeholders in real time. That's really important, right?
I'll give you a little different perspective here. One, you were mentioning the operators. I doubt that there is an operator in that plant that's been there for more than a year. It's constant turnover. This is in the very Latin part of Miami. And a lot of the people that come in there get either poached by other companies because they pay more. So Niagara and some of the bigger bottlers are in the area. And this is an entirely pretty much Spanish speaking plant. So the input, really the operators rarely know a lot of what's going on. Most of the, what I would call the upper levels, some operators are just moving boxes. Those operators, they're manual labor mostly. The people that actually run the lines, there's probably 1 or 2 to 3 maintenance people, running around the plant at some given time, including the maintenance manager, who's pretty hands-on. Those people is closer to what I would call operators, even though they can fix things. They can, a few of them are even a little bit PLC literate, although it's pretty rare that they need to go in and change everything. We have good message displays and things on the local HMIs to tell them what's wrong with the machines. One of the things we're transitioning into is grabbing all of the current production data and putting it on a great big old screen so that mostly those maintenance guys can look up, but also we're getting a little bit of competition going between, hey, the last guys achieved this output on the PET line. They're about to move over to the Tetra line 2, and they're going to try to beat the previous guys on Tetra line 2 in keeping that thing up and producing and getting done. And so you were talking about forecasting. We are already doing some of that, but of course it's by hand and it's on Excel spreadsheets. There's some pretty elaborate macros that the plant manager runs on those. And what we're trying to do is bring all the stuff that he's created over probably 15 years of being the plant manager and creating these spreadsheets and bring them into the Ignition platform with all the tags and data that we have in real time and minimize the amount that he has to go in there. It's really nice to say that you can drop, $500,000 on a project. Their margins are very low. Like I said, they get beat up by the local Niagara and Nestle plants that come in and just poach their employees. They can pay more. These guys are small and they know they're small, so they kind of make use of it. And it's more like a McDonald's thing. You bring an operator in there and you make it as simple as you can for that operator to keep the palletizer running or run the juice production machines or the boxing machines, the fillers, whatever it is. And when they leave, you deal with it. You deal with it and you get a new guy, right? And you plug him in. And that's really all they can do right now. They don't have a ton of money to put it. But the fortunate part is, like I said, there's maybe 5 or 6 people that I would call stakeholders. And then and like I said, the important operators from our standpoint are the ones that are there for years. And, they're really more maintenance guys. They're from Argentina, which is where the plant was originally from. And it's really important that, yes, that they have buy-in, right? One of the things I posted about before is if you don't have buy-in from the plant floor workers, they're going to think that you're just part of it. You're running something that's like a special club and they're not part of it. That's one of my complaints about Six Sigma. You have the green belts and the black belts and they're all over there talking about all the fancy stuff they're doing and everybody else feels left out. So we're really trying to bring the guys that are there for years into this process and get feedback from them. What information do you need, right, to keep your stuff running? So,
and I wouldn't be surprised if you actually got a longer retention out of involving some of those early stage employees in the process too, right? Engaging them. Everyone's a stakeholder. No human being is dumb. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone can provide value. They may not be in the right job, right? I think that a human being could provide a lot more value than kicking a box and, moving it at the end of the line. But that may be the state of the business right now, but it's not the future state of the business. That employee is not going to get replaced. That employee is going to get reappropriated and leveraged for
here's the interesting part.
So innovation happens on the plant floor, right?
Yeah,
and you said that, right?
Their workers, many of them are awaiting papers. In other words, they get them because they're not theoretically, they can work under some, they have some kind of a visa maybe, but they don't have their green cards yet. They don't have permission to be here. As soon as they get that permission, they usually find other things to do. So, and that's not my decision.
Unfortunate.
That's the way they run things. So it's kind of been a stopping point for when people get legally able to work for some of the bigger companies and then they move on. It's just the practical side of it. Now, would we like it to be something different? Would the owners like it to be something different? I'm sure they would, but right now I don't think they have a method to accomplish that, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the method would be number 3, starting with admitting there's a problem. If they're fine with that turnover, then there's no problem, right? I obviously, think that that's a problem, but how we go about solving that, my approach might be different than what their approach is. But, I would start with the approach of like, treating the employees as all stakeholders, giving them that information they need, going away from that Six Sigma approach where the carpeted side of the business is somehow so much more important than the concrete side of the business, right? The OT side. That's what's disengaging the operators, right? I'm not saying that you guys are doing that, but like this prediction, right? Number 6, prediction. It's not prediction happening in a data center on some graph that a data analyst come up with. It's a prediction that shows to the operator in real time, hey, this machine is going to go down in the next hour if you don't replace this bearing. Like that's something anyone can understand. Like that's very intuitive, right? It's getting that information from the cloud and rolling it back down to the edge. Everyone wants to go edge to cloud, but everyone forgets about cloud to edge. You need to get that context from your cloud and roll it back down to the edge. So those predictions can actually be available to your operators in real time. So that's prediction. And then 7, that's the recommendation piece. Recommend we replace the bearing, right? Recommend preventative maintenance. There's recommendation going on. But last but not least, number 8, this is where the human being comes in. That recommendation from machine learning and AI is just that. It's just a recommendation to the operator. The human being takes their unique ability to process data in a way unlike any other computer can. And I truly believe ever will be able to. The human being gets to decide what gets executed, right? So that is the manufacturing holy grail. And to kind of summarize it all again, your business is fully connected. All the people, all the smart things, the people, hardware, and software in your business are connected. They're integrated, and your stakeholders are informed in real time. Because they're connected and because they're integrated, your stakeholders can be informed in real time of the current state, but not only the current state, informed of the future state of the business in real time. With that future state information, and this could be other applications calculating this too, by the way, right? Your AWS machine learning application could come up with a prediction, and then another piece of software could come up with the recommendation based on that prediction. And you can't do that, right? That's why you need the unified namespace, because you're building these tools, you're building the digital version of your business, you're automating the business, right? So there's prediction going on and there's recommendation. And then last but not least, your operators get to actually do what they're best at, which is be smart, creative, and insightful human beings. So that is the manufacturing holy grail. It's there isn't actually not a finish line. It just continues to go. But this is why when people say industry 5.0, I just fucking laugh, because no one has this right now, right? If this is the end goal of industry 4.0, show me one fucking company that has anything close to this. Well, it's Tesla and it's Amazon, right? But there's still a lot more prediction and a lot more recommendation that could be going on. You know what I'm saying? So it's this is it, right? This is the digitalization. Well, not just digitalization, because that's just like talking about taking a piece of paper and turning it into a digital piece of paper. But this is the digital transformation. It's coming in as a caterpillar, and it's going out as a butterfly. And if people laugh and they think that's funny, right? Some people say digital transformation is continuous improvement. And it's literally not. There is a mindset shift. There's a transformation, and there's, that needs to occur. And that's why, 9 out of 10 companies fail in this process. So I do want to show this last slide here. This is kind of like a little bonus. So I talked a little bit earlier about, your ignition gateway, especially because it's using OPC UA to talk to your PLCs, that's, it's really kind of set up as your edge device, which then would allow, so this would kind of be your local unified namespace. This would be your ignition gateway right here. And, if you only have one plant, then it's only going to ever look like what you see over here on the left. But real easily, they could scale out to plant 2, plant 3, right? Or, maybe this is just line 1. This same architecture, it kind of creates like a tree architecture where you can build unified namespaces up to where you get your enterprise unified namespace, and then you could roll it back down to your plant layer. But I hope I didn't go too long. And I hope that was valuable.
I think that was good. And a lot of times we do go a little bit over. You were talking about the prediction. One of the things that came to mind there is I also work with a very high-tech local company here called Automation NTH, and they build some of that prediction into their machinery. They do a lot of work for pharmaceutical companies, and their biggest customer is Dexcom. And I've had, NTH on here and we've talked about that, but ignitions on every machine. And a lot of what they do is like, rather than an alarm that something is too hot, you have approaching data points where you have consecutive readings where, the slope is getting too large. So you're doing predictions based on that.
That's awesome. Yeah. You're
Yeah,
taking the derivative.
Yeah.
This was actually, this is a little, we did this like in a demo where, let's say you're doing a sales pitch, or not a sales pitch, but you're trying to get buy-in from a team. You're doing a presentation and you're like, hey, why am I going to do this? What's the value? You find a problem that they've had for like 10 years and you solve it in 10 minutes. Right.
Exactly.
And for an oil and gas company, in this case, it happened to be time and tank, right? That's almost the same exact problem, right? The operator doesn't care that he's 2 inches away from the high level if the level's not even moving, right? Exactly. But he definitely cares if they're 50% full and that thing's going to overflow in the next 2 hours, right? So real easily, by leveraging the unified namespace, you're able to take that information, create new context, and publish it back into the unified namespace for publishing and making available to your operators in a way that wasn't possible before.
Yeah, and honestly, we didn't think of a lot of that until watching a lot of Walker's presentations and realizing that, yes, publishing things back into the namespace so some other application can grab it and deal with it. Now, a lot of what we're doing is trying to duplicate what the plant manager has done with a lot of his predictive things in the, but we're going to take, that's why I really appreciate the input from you guys. And I would love to have the time to actually join some of these things like the mentorship mastermind program. But unfortunately, I'm also involved in other things and have to service those. But it's possible that Juan Pablo himself will come join it because he's the one who really, that's where the rubber meets the road. When I finish up here, by the way, for those who didn't know, I write books. I've published several of them, and that's what these are. I am coming out with a new one in 2021, writing it partially because of Automation NTH. They need it for Dexcom. So we're putting together a troubleshooting course and industrial maintenance course, and including a lot of this kind of 4.0 terminology, which is where this comes in. A lot of these things like we're talking about MQTT and Node-RED and gosh, I forget, OSI Pi, PTC, a lot of the things that came up yesterday, Walker talks fast. He comes up with lots of stuff. And every time he mentions something new that I don't maybe know something about, I throw it into this industrial acronyms and definitions as much for Juan Pablo or some of the plant floor people as anybody else so that they know what's going on. You'll have to send me an email for that. For those of you who are watching, on YouTube or whatever, shoot me an email and I'll send you the current version. I put 9 July on there because I added 4 or 5 more acronyms. It's about 12 pages long now, and it's going to make its way into some of these other documents. As far as everything else, I do post this on YouTube when I'm done. I don't, if you look up Automation Consulting, which is my company name, you will find the YouTube channel, but I usually just tell people type that word in and you'll find me that way. And mostly what's on there, I do have some, free PLC training things on there, whatever, but I also post all these webinars on there. And of course, I also posted in the Automation Academy. I don't see anybody on this list that is a member of the Automation Academy right now, but they're used to grabbing it from there. I just stick the webinars on there along with all my other courses and things like that. I'd like to thank a couple of people I see here that I see regularly, Vlad and Tim. It's great seeing you guys again. They've both been guests here and we've talked about everything from systems integration to all the fun stuff Tim does. Tim makes stuff and teaches people and does a lot of
I just want to say thanks, Zach, for this. I always enjoy Zach's he keeps it entertaining and informative. So yeah, I like your work a lot, and I'll probably lose y'all in about 30 seconds. I just want to butt in and say that.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. And
I always like
to
listening to Zach. Zach's very, knows all this good, I guess, like Walker does, ways of engaging people and things to say. And I'm not very good at that part of it, but I'm kind of having to put something up every 2 weeks, which is why I started this thing. And I definitely appreciate folks showing up. Mythcell, I didn't get to hear anything from you. But we saw you hanging on there the whole time. I don't know if anybody else was tagging along that doesn't show up in the list, but it was great seeing all you guys. And
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. And thanks to you again, Frank. I appreciate it.
well, thank you guys. And anybody who's interested, the next webinar, I very well may be at ABD. You know, I do a lot of my webinars from there, and I do it from Juan Pablo's office. Interesting thing about him, he's on an RV trip right now across the country, 2.5 months, and we both remote into the plant. We do all our PLC work from here into ignition, into the PLCs, and we're able to change things or modify things as we go. It's kind of a nice feature. We're still working on the rest of it, but the next webinar will probably be from there. I think I leave on the 19th to go down there. But it was great.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next go round.